Leo Carter's heart raced before he even reached the classroom. The alarm blared through the hallways of the orbital school station, red lights flashing on every metallic surface. Sparks flew from the ceiling panels above as a strange, skittering sound echoed down the corridor. Students shrieked and ran, colliding into each other, their panic filling the air. Leo pushed past the chaos, his boots clanging against the floor, scanning for the source. Something had broken loose in the experimental lab. Something alive. He reached the door to classroom 12B and slammed his hand on the panel. "Everyone stay calm. Get to the center of the room and follow me." His voice carried authority, sharp and steady, even though his chest heaved with adrenaline. A flicker of shadow darted across the window. A small, glowing shape zipped along the ceiling. Students froze, pointing and whispering, but Leo didn't flinch. He saw it immediately, a tiny dragon no bigger than a cat, with scales that shimmered in shades of violet and blue. The dragon tumbled through the air, clutching a pile of neatly stacked papers in its claws. Its wings beat frantically, stirring sparks from the overhead wiring. Students gasped and laughed at first. "It's just a dragon doing homework," one whispered. But Leo didn't laugh. He studied the creature, noting its tense posture, its focused eyes. Something about it wasn't ordinary. Before anyone could react further, a metallic clanging came from the hall. A group of small, spider-like alien drones skittered into view, their sharp claws scraping the floor, eyes glowing red. Panic erupted again. Students screamed, scattering to the corners. Leo didn't hesitate. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and held it like a baton. "Back. Everyone stay behind me." He darted forward, his mind calculating. The drones moved fast but predictable, and Leo used the extinguisher to block their approach, knocking one sideways. Sparks flew from its circuits and it collapsed. The tiny dragon hovered near the ceiling, squeaking and spinning in the air. Then, in a movement so quick it barely registered, Piran, the dragon, dropped the stack of homework. A glowing pattern shimmered across the top sheet, almost like a circuit board. Leo blinked. The dragon wasn't just flapping in panic. It was trying to communicate, guiding him. He crouched low, gesturing to the students, "Stay close. Don't touch anything." Piran zipped to the nearest terminal, tapping a claw on the screen. Instantly, a force field shimmered around the classroom, flickering but solid enough to block the alien drones. Students froze in disbelief. "It's protecting us?" a girl whispered, her eyes wide. Leo's jaw tightened. "Yeah," he said. "It is. And we need to help it work." Leo moved to the terminal, scanning the lines of glowing code that Piran had activated. His mind raced. If he could just redirect the station's energy output, they could stabilize the field long enough to contain the intruders. Every second mattered. Sparks flew dangerously close to the students. One stray wire arced, sending a jolt of electricity across the floor. Leo grabbed a student's arm, yanking him back. "Careful. Don't step there." Piran squeaked, spinning, beating wings furiously, then darted toward the ceiling again. Leo followed its movements, realizing the dragon's actions mirrored the station's hidden layout. Its patterns weren't random. The little dragon knew exactly which circuits to activate. Every flick of its claws had a purpose. The classroom became a strange dance of human and dragon. Students began to cheer quietly, awe replacing fear. Leo allowed himself a small, tense smile. They were surviving. Together. A sudden jolt shook the classroom. A large panel above them cracked and tilted, threatening to fall. Leo yelled, "Move," and shoved the nearest students aside. Piran shrieked and darted upward, clawing at the panel, somehow balancing it enough for it not to collapse completely. Leo's heart pounded in his ears. The tiny dragon was tiny, fragile, yet it acted with intelligence and courage far beyond what anyone expected. For a brief moment, silence fell over the room. Students clutched each other, eyes glued to Piran hovering above them, glowing faintly from the light of the emergency panels. Leo crouched beside the dragon, speaking softly. "We're going to make it. Just follow my lead, little guy." Piran chirped in response, almost like an agreement, then zipped down to adjust the field controls again. Sparks and alien shadows danced around them, but the teamwork between human and dragon began to tip the odds. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, then went out, plunging the classroom into near darkness. The force field shimmered weakly, trembling under pressure. The alien drones hissed from beyond the glass, red eyes glowing in the darkness. Leo's stomach twisted. They weren't safe yet, not by a long shot. Piran hovered close to him, wings glowing faintly, eyes locked on the flickering panel that controlled the field. Leo swallowed hard. He could feel it, the moment of truth approaching. If he miscalculated even slightly, the classroom would be overrun. His fingers trembled slightly over the terminal, but he steadied himself. "All right, Piran, let's finish this." A sudden sharp screech echoed from the hall. All the students jumped. Leo's eyes widened as he looked at the doorway. The alien drones were massing for another strike. He glanced at Piran. The dragon's scales glowed brighter, almost defiantly. Then, without warning, Piran dropped the last sheet of homework onto the terminal. The paper flashed brilliantly, sending a pulse of light through the room. The force field surged outward, stronger than before. The drones froze mid-step, their claws sparking against the invisible wall. Leo exhaled sharply, relief and adrenaline mixing in his chest. The classroom was safe for now. But as he looked down at the glowing homework, he noticed strange symbols moving across the paper. Shapes he didn't understand, almost alive. Piran chirped, wings quivering. Leo felt a shiver run down his spine. What is this?" he whispered. Before anyone could answer, a deep, mechanical hum resonated through the station, louder than any alarm. The lights flickered again. The air vibrated. And from the shadows beyond the reinforced door, something far larger than the small drones began to stir. Leo's eyes widened. He grabbed Piran gently. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." A metallic rumble echoed, shaking the room. Sparks rained from above. Piran glared at the doorway, wings beating furiously. And then, silence except for the distant, slow thrum of something approaching. Whatever comes next, they won't be ready for it. Leo barely had time to catch his breath before the classroom door shuddered under a fresh wave of impact. The red glow of the alien drone's eyes flickered like fire, their claws scraping across the reinforced metal. Students pressed together in the center of the room, faces pale, clutching one another in silent fear. Leo's gaze swept over them, measuring panic against potential action. He couldn't let fear dictate this moment, he had to act. "Everyone stay close. Don't touch anything except me," he barked, voice sharp but calm. A small tremor ran through the floor, and sparks showered down from the cracked ceiling. Leo gestured to Piran, who hovered near the terminal, wings flicking nervously. The dragon chirped, a short, sharp note that seemed almost like a signal. Leo realized Piran wasn't just helping, they were coordinating. The drones skittered closer, their metal joints squeaking, bodies low to the ground. One lunged at the force field, striking it with a jagged claw. The energy rippled, and the shield wavered for a heartbeat. Students gasped. Leo's hands went to the terminal, typing rapidly to reroute the station's power flow. He didn't have the luxury of hesitation. Every keystroke mattered. Miscalculations could blow the field entirely. Sparks jumped from a nearby conduit, dancing across the floor like dangerous fireflies. Piran dove toward the main control panel, clutching his glowing homework. The symbols on the sheets shimmered, and Leo felt a flicker of understanding. The dragon's homework wasn't mere assignments, it contained a complex set of instructions, almost like a blueprint for manipulating the station systems. He leaned closer, reading the shifting lines of light, translating the patterns in real time. "Okay, follow me, little guy," he muttered. The dragon chirped in agreement and nudged a lever with its tiny claw, activating the first sequence. The force field pulsed brighter. One drone yelped as it tried to push through, sparks flying from its joints. Students stared, eyes wide. How is a little dragon doing that?" one whispered. Leo didn't answer. There was no time. Another tremor rattled the room as the drones coordinated a new attack, moving faster and more aggressively. One drone leapt at a panel above, sending shards of metal clattering to the floor. Leo shoved a student aside just in time, heart hammering. "Watch your step. Stay behind the desk," he shouted. Piran whirled, wings flashing, and dropped the homework onto the nearest panel. A surge of light spread through the wires, and a sudden vibration ran up Leo's arm. The shield strengthened again, just enough to push the drones back slightly. The students cheered quietly, relief flickering across their frightened faces. Leo allowed himself a tense smile. A small victory, but the battle was far from over. The hum of the station shifted. Leo's brow furrowed. The drones weren't working independently, they were coordinating, adapting. He had to stay one step ahead. He grabbed a portable console and began feeding power into the secondary field nodes, guided by Piran's movements. The dragon darted back and forth, wings beating frantically, tapping on exposed terminals with precision. Sparks flew dangerously close to his fingers. Leo ignored the stings, keeping his focus razor-sharp. One of the smaller drones lunged directly at the console. Leo kicked it aside with a solid thud, but a shower of sparks rained across the floor. The student shrieked. Leo's heart thumped, adrenaline pumping. Stay calm. Stay calm, he repeated, more to himself than anyone else. Piran chirped sharply, diving at the drone with a burst of light emanating from his scales. The creature yelped and recoiled, stunned. Leo felt a glimmer of hope. The tiny dragon wasn't just smart, he was brave. Another tremor shook the room, stronger this time. One of the ceiling panels hung loose, threatening to fall. Leo glanced up. Everyone move back, he shouted, diving for the nearest student. The panel cracked and tilted, but Piran swooped upward, his tiny claws catching it and holding it just long enough for the last student to move safely. Leo's heart skipped. The dragon's courage outweighed its size in every possible way. Leo realized something critical. The dragon's homework wasn't just reactive, it was proactive. Each glowing symbol predicted the drone's movements, triggering energy flows that preempted their attacks. The little creature had understood the station's systems in a way no human had. Leo felt a surge of admiration mixed with responsibility. They were partners now. One misstep and everyone in the room could die. Okay, Piran, Leo muttered, time for the next step. Let's make sure they can't reach the doors. The dragon chirped and darted to a nearby ventilation shaft, peering inside. Sparks flickered and a low hum vibrated through the metal. The drones hesitated, their red eyes scanning the air, confused by an unseen barrier. Leo's mind raced. If they could reinforce the shafts using the energy nodes, they might contain the intruders long enough to stabilize the station. He moved quickly, following the dragon's lead, rerouting power and sealing circuits. Each small success strengthened the force field and gave students a glimmer of hope. Their fear turned into quiet determination, eyes wide as they watched a human and a tiny dragon outsmart an impossible threat. Leo felt a momentary swell of pride, tempered immediately by the danger surrounding them. Suddenly the lights flickered violently. The energy nodes surged unpredictably. Sparks erupted from the ceiling and a loud, metallic screech echoed from the hall. The drones weren't just attacking, they were adapting faster than Leo could anticipate. He looked at Piran. The dragon hovered near the panel, glowing brighter, wings flaring with intensity. Leo swallowed hard, knowing the next move would be critical. Piran, we're not done yet, he whispered, fingers hovering over the controls. The dragon chirped sharply, almost like a warning. Leo's eyes narrowed as the humming grew louder, vibrations thrumming through the floor. He realized the drones were just the beginning. Something larger was coming, something they couldn't yet see. The force field wavered, a shimmer of blue and violet dancing along its edges. Students huddled, holding their breath. Leo clenched his jaw, gripping the console. The humming grew into a deep, resonant pulse. Piran's eyes glowed fiercely, scales reflecting the trembling lights. And then, from the shadows beyond the classroom door, a new sound emerged. A low, slow vibration, unlike anything Leo had ever heard. The floor shivered beneath their feet. The alien drones paused, whirring nervously. Leo's stomach twisted. He leaned closer to Piran. This isn't over, not even close. The dragon chirped, wings beating in tense anticipation, eyes fixed on the door. And as the first hint of a massive shadow passed beneath the dim flicker of emergency lights, Leo realized that what they were facing now was far bigger, and far more dangerous, than anyone had imagined. Whatever comes next, they would need every ounce of courage and cleverness to survive. Leo's hands shook as he stared at the shadow moving beyond the reinforced classroom doors. It wasn't a drone, or any creature he had seen before. Its shape was massive, stretching taller than the ceiling panels, and yet fluid, almost liquid in its movements. The low hum from the hall vibrated through the floor, rattling the students' teeth. Leo felt his pulse spike. Every instinct screamed that they were not just in danger, they were insignificant against whatever approached. Stay behind me, Leo shouted, planting himself between the students and the door. Piran hovered nearby, wings beating rapidly, scales flashing iridescent blues and violets like warning lights. The dragon chirped sharply, circling Leo's head, almost as if urging him to act faster. Leo's mind raced. This wasn't just about holding the force field anymore, it was about understanding what they were facing and turning the tide before the creature breached the room. He crouched near the terminal, scanning Piran's glowing homework again. The symbols shimmered and shifted, almost alive. A sudden realization struck him. This was no ordinary assignment. The dragon had encoded instructions, a sequence that could manipulate not just the classroom shields but the entire orbital station systems. Leo's fingers trembled as he began to trace the patterns, trying to decipher the logic. Each line corresponded to a circuit, each glowing mark a command. "Piran, what are you showing me?" Leo muttered under his breath. The dragon chirped, then nudged a lever on the terminal with a claw, activating a section of the station's power grid. The lights along the walls pulsed, rippling outward like water in a pond. Sparks flickered along the panels, but the force field strengthened, quivering but resilient. The students gasped, eyes wide. One whispered, "It's thinking." Leo nodded grimly. The dragon was thinking. And he was realizing it might be smarter than any of them. The massive shadow at the door shifted again, stretching taller, vibrating the walls. The alien drones scattered, retreating to the corners as if instinctively aware that something far stronger had arrived. Leo's jaw tightened. He had to act fast. "Piran, we need to stabilize the whole corridor. If this thing gets past the drones, it'll crush the station." Piran responded immediately, fluttering to the nearest control panel, claws tracing intricate motions. Leo followed, typing rapidly, connecting the dragon sequence with the station's main power nodes. The humming intensified, a deep resonance that vibrated the floor and made the students' stomachs lurch. Sparks danced along the panels, but slowly the corridor lights began to stabilize, revealing more of the creature's form. It was massive, almost serpentine, with glowing veins running along its translucent body, eyes flickering like liquid gold. Leo's mind raced. This creature was intelligent, adaptive, and clearly aware of the energy flows Piran was manipulating. He realized something shocking. The tiny dragon had not just prepared for the classroom, it had anticipated the arrival of this massive entity. Piran's homework wasn't just an assignment, it was a plan, a survival strategy encoded by instinct, intelligence, or something beyond human understanding. The dragon chirped sharply, then hovered beside Leo, wings beating faster as if emphasizing urgency. Leo noticed a pattern in the glowing homework symbols. One sequence repeated in a rhythm that mirrored the massive creature's movements. He adjusted the power flow to match, letting the energy pulse through the floor and walls in synchrony. Sparks erupted from the conduits, the floor vibrating, but slowly, imperceptibly, the creature faltered, tilting its massive body as if confused by the unexpected pulse. Students held their breath, leaning against each other, eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. Leo's chest pounded, sweat streaking down his face. Every second mattered. One misstep, and the entire classroom, and possibly the station, could be destroyed. He whispered to Piran, "We're not done yet, follow my lead." The dragon chirped in acknowledgement, and together they adjusted the circuits, each pulse carefully timed, each lever moved with precision. Then a sudden screech tore through the hall, louder and sharper than before. Sparks showered across the floor. One of the drones attempted a desperate leap toward the console, but Piran darted in midair, swatting it aside with a precise swipe of his claw. Leo typed furiously, rerouting power through the secondary nodes. The force field flared, shimmering brighter, then stabilized. The massive creature recoiled, twisting in the corridor, its liquid gold eyes fixed on the glowing dragon. Leo's mind raced. He realized the creature wasn't attacking indiscriminately, it was testing the dragon's patterns, probing for weaknesses. And Piran wasn't just responding, he was anticipating. The tiny dragon, fragile as he seemed, was orchestrating their defense with near-perfect timing. It wasn't just courage, it was brilliance. A sudden idea struck Leo. If he could amplify the dragon sequence using the station's main core, they might be able to push the creature back entirely, or at least contain it temporarily. But doing so would risk overloading the systems. Sparks would fly, panels could explode, and the students would be in danger if the calculation failed. He glanced at Piran, who chirped, wings bristling as if sensing his thoughts. The dragon was ready. Leo squared his shoulders. "Okay, let's see if we can really turn the tide," he muttered. Fingers dancing over the terminal, he connected the final nodes, letting the energy pulse in sync with Piran's homework sequence. The lights flashed, the floor vibrated violently, and the corridor thrummed with power. The massive creature froze, body rigid, scales flickering with reflected energy. For the first time, it hesitated. Students whispered in awe, their fear mixing with wonder. Leo felt a small surge of hope. They might actually survive this. Then a sudden pulse shot from the far end of the corridor, a signal far more precise than the creature's movements. It glowed on the walls like a warning, and Leo realized with a jolt that the massive entity wasn't acting alone. Something beyond the station was coordinating it, sending signals that even Piran hadn't anticipated. Leo's stomach dropped. He glanced at the dragon. Piran chirped sharply, wings flaring, eyes glowing fiercely. The dragon seemed to sense the shift, ready to adapt. But Leo knew this was bigger than anything they had faced. Piran. This isn't over, he whispered. His hands tightened on the console. The students looked at him, eyes wide, trusting him to act. The shadow in the corridor shifted again, larger, faster, more threatening. Sparks rained from exposed panels, and the humming grew deafening. Leo swallowed hard, heart racing. They had survived the drones, but now a far greater intelligence was testing them, probing for weakness. The tiny dragon chirped urgently, hovering close to Leo's shoulder, eyes fixed on the shifting patterns. Leo felt a surge of determination. Together, human and dragon had turned the tide before, they could do it again. But the humming, the pulse, and the massive shadow all warned the same truth. What came next would demand every ounce of courage, every fraction of cleverness they had. And from the shadows, something began to stir. A presence far older, far smarter, and far more dangerous than the tiny drones or even the massive creature before them. Leo knew one thing for certain. The turning point had arrived, but surviving it would test the limits of human and dragon alike. Leo's breath came in shallow bursts, his hands gripping the terminal as the shadow in the corridor grew darker, larger, more oppressive. Sparks flickered across the floor, sending students stumbling backward. The massive creature moved with terrifying intelligence, its liquid gold eyes tracking every pulse of energy Leo and Piran had carefully orchestrated. Every instinct told him that hesitation meant death, but he forced himself to focus. There was only one path: act boldly or be crushed. Everyone stay down. Leo shouted, his voice slicing through the cacophony of alarms and metallic screeches. The students ducked instinctively, some pressed to the floor, others huddled behind overturned desks. Sparks arced across the floor as the massive creature slammed a claw into the force field. The shield wavered, distorting under pressure. Leo's jaw clenched. One misstep and the barrier would collapse. Piran hovered beside him, wings beating furiously, glowing brighter than ever. The tiny dragon chirped sharply as if issuing a command. Leo followed its lead, fingers flying across the console. He routed power through the secondary cores, channeling energy to the field nodes Piran had identified. The force field shivered, then held, just barely, against the massive assault. A student whimpered. Leo glanced down, locking eyes with her. Her small hand clutched a backpack for protection. "It's okay," he said, voice firm but gentle. "We're going to make it." He could feel the weight of every student's fear pressing on him. Every decision now carried the lives of dozens. But Leo didn't flinch. Courage wasn't about being fearless, it was about acting despite fear. The massive creature surged forward again, but this time it paused, swaying as if confused by a pattern in the energy pulses. Leo's stomach clenched. Piran was reading its movements, anticipating them, and reacting faster than Leo could. Every flick of the dragon's claws triggered a response in the force field, creating subtle barriers that redirected the creature's attacks. Sparks flew around them, panels cracked, and the hum of the station's systems roared louder than ever. Leo's mind raced. He realized the dragon's homework, the glowing, shifting symbols, wasn't just a shield formula. It was a control algorithm, able to manipulate the station's energy flows in real time. If he could amplify it through the main power core, they might push the creature back entirely, or at least contain it long enough to escape the corridor. But doing so would overload circuits, risking fires, sparks, or worse. One wrong calculation and the students would be trapped in a living furnace. "Piran, this is it," Leo muttered. The dragon chirped sharply, wings flaring, almost as if acknowledging the risk. Leo's fingers danced across the terminal, connecting the final nodes, linking Piran's algorithm to the core systems. The lights flared, the floor vibrated violently, and a surge of energy raced through the shield. Sparks erupted, panels groaned, and the massive creature froze mid-step, claws poised in the air. Students gasped. Their fear turned to awe. It's working," one whispered. Leo's chest heaved. They had stabilized the force field long enough to buy time. But the creature wasn't defeated. Its eyes flickered gold, then crimson, and it let out a deep, resonant roar that rattled the walls. Leo flinched, hearing the vibration in his chest. The creature was testing them again, probing for weaknesses in their human-dragon collaboration. He glanced at Piran. The little dragon hovered beside the console, wings beating frantically, eyes fixed on the glowing panels. Its determination mirrored his own. Leo felt a surge of admiration and resolve. They were partners now, human and dragon, intelligence and courage combined against an impossible opponent. "All right, time to take the fight to them," Leo muttered. He adjusted the final lever, sending a precise pulse of energy down the corridor. Sparks leapt along the walls and the massive creature recoiled, hissing as it was pushed back by an invisible barrier. Leo pushed harder, channeling more energy, letting the dragon's homework guide every calculation. The shield pulsed and expanded, forcing the creature into a corner. But then, a sudden surge of sound and vibration slammed the room. Panels above them cracked further, and a shower of sparks rained down. One student screamed, clutching her ears. Leo dove, pulling her behind a desk as a loose conduit arced dangerously close. Piran chirped sharply, circling the falling panel and pushing it just enough to prevent a collapse. Leo's heart raced. The tiny dragon was fragile, but its courage was limitless. The massive creature thrashed, energy coursing along its translucent body, but the combined force of Leo's ingenuity and Piran's algorithm held it at bay. Students watched, wide-eyed, as human determination and dragon brilliance held the line against something that seemed impossible to defeat. Leo's chest ached, adrenaline pumping, but he forced himself to stay calm. Each pulse of energy, each adjustment was critical. Then the humming shifted. A metallic resonance filled the room, deeper, slower, more deliberate. The massive creature froze completely, as if responding to a signal beyond Leo's understanding. He realized with a jolt that this entity was not acting alone. It was being directed by something outside the station, something far smarter and far older. Leo's stomach twisted, but he didn't falter. "Piran, we've done all we can here," he whispered. The dragon chirped in agreement, hovering close, scales glowing brighter than ever. Leo's eyes scanned the room, students trembling but alive, sparks falling, panels cracked, but the force field still held. For now they had survived. But as he looked down at the glowing homework, he noticed the symbols shifting again, pulsing in rhythm with the creature's movements. Piran's eyes flickered with understanding. Leo's heart sank. This was only the beginning. The algorithm wasn't just a defensive tool, it was a map, a signal, a warning of something greater waiting beyond the shadows. He straightened, determination hardening his jaw. "We've won this round," he said, voice steady, "but whatever is controlling that thing, it's not finished with us." The students looked to him, eyes wide, hanging on every word. Leo felt a surge of human pride and courage. Against impossible odds, they had survived through intelligence, collaboration, and empathy. Piran chirped sharply, wings flaring, eyes locked on the corridor. The massive shadow shifted again, larger than before, and the station trembled. Leo clenched his fists. They had faced the impossible and won, for now, but he knew the real challenge had only just begun. The next battle was coming, and it would demand everything human and dragon had to give. The classroom was silent now, except for the hum of the station's energy and the occasional drip of sparks from fractured panels. Students pressed close together, trembling but alive, faces pale with awe and lingering fear. The massive creature had retreated into the shadows of the corridor, contained, for now, by the combined efforts of Leo Carter and the tiny dragon Piran. Leo wiped sweat from his brow, his chest heaving, but he refused to relax entirely. Survival was temporary, vigilance remained critical. He crouched near the console, watching Piran hover over the glowing homework. The symbols shimmered in patterns he had only begun to comprehend. You saved us all, little guy," he whispered, reaching out to scratch behind Piran's ears. The dragon chirped, scales gleaming with iridescent blues and purples, wings flicking in rapid, satisfied motion. Students leaned forward, eyes wide. The smallest dragon in the station, once mocked, had orchestrated their defense. Leo felt a swelling pride, not just for Piran, but for the potential of humanity to recognize courage and brilliance in the most unlikely allies. The teacher, Commander Harrigan, finally entered the room, flanked by security drones now deactivated. His sharp gaze fell on Piran first, then on Leo. "What in the galaxy?" he muttered. The words hung in the air, disbelief and awe intertwined. Students whispered among themselves. Laughter, once aimed at Piran's homework obsession, had been replaced by stunned admiration. Leo straightened, glancing at the students. "It wasn't just the homework," he said firmly. "It was understanding. Planning. Courage. Piran helped us survive because he thought just like we do. Humans, and dragons, can do amazing things when we work together." His words carried weight. He could feel the shift in the classroom. Fear was giving way to inspiration. A student raised her hand timidly. "But, how did he know all that?" Her voice quivered. Leo smiled faintly, glancing at Piran, whose glowing eyes seemed to reflect intelligence far beyond ordinary creatures. Sometimes, he said carefully, brilliance comes in forms you don't expect. You just have to pay attention and have the courage to act on it. The students nodded slowly, absorbing his words. Some glanced at Piran with newfound respect, others at Leo, who had led them through the impossible. The station's emergency lights flickered gently, casting shadows that danced across broken panels, but the tension had eased. Relief mixed with wonder. For a few brief moments, hope outweighed fear. Leo allowed himself a small breath, but then the humming returned, not the chaotic noise of the drones but a deep, resonant pulse from the station's outer network. He frowned, realizing the massive creature had not been acting alone. Something else, far larger and more intelligent, had been coordinating its movements. Piran's glowing homework seemed to react subtly, symbols pulsing in sync with the distant signal. The dragon chirped sharply, wings beating with urgency. Leo's mind raced. "You're telling me, it's bigger than we thought?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Piran's eyes glinted knowingly. He chirped again, circling the console as if scanning for patterns in the distant pulse. Leo realized the dragon understood something he did not yet grasp, something vital about the network beyond the station. Commander Harrigan broke the silence, his tone now tinged with genuine respect. "Leo, Piran, you've just demonstrated something remarkable. Not just courage, not just quick thinking, but the ability to adapt, to use intelligence and empathy together. That's human. And perhaps more." He glanced around at the students, who were still frozen in a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Let this be a lesson. Brilliance can appear anywhere. Don't dismiss it." Leo nodded. "It's a team effort," he said. "Humans, dragons, anyone willing to think, act, and care for others. That's what keeps us alive." His words were met with quiet agreement. A small wave of understanding and respect swept across the students. They had witnessed impossible odds faced head-on, and they understood the value of courage, intellect, and collaboration. The massive creature's hum continued faintly in the background. Leo's eyes narrowed. They had survived the immediate danger, but he knew the universe wasn't done testing them. He glanced at Piran. The dragon hovered calmly now, wings folded slightly, but eyes still glowing with alertness. Leo felt a surge of respect and determination. They had won this battle, but the war, in whatever form it would take, was far from over. "Piran," he whispered, "we'll need to be ready for whatever comes next. I think this is only the beginning." The dragon chirped in agreement, nudging a lever on the console, and the homework's glow pulsed in response. Leo realized that the tiny dragon had more insight than anyone else in the room. Its love for knowledge had just saved their lives. Outside the classroom, the station's corridors were quiet again. Sparks fell, panels hummed, and the students began to stand, slowly regaining their composure. Yet, from the distant shadows of the outer station, a faint, deliberate pulse echoed, stronger than before, almost like a heartbeat. Leo's chest tightened. Whatever had sent the massive creature here wasn't finished. Something far older, far smarter, and far more dangerous was watching them. He looked around the classroom. Students' eyes met his, and for a moment, fear and wonder mixed. "Remember this," he said quietly, voice firm. "Courage, intelligence, and compassion matter more than anything else. That's what makes us human. And that can survive anything." Piran chirped again, wings fluttering as if signaling agreement. Leo allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. They had survived, inspired, and proved that even the smallest creature, or human, could change the outcome against impossible odds. But as the lights flickered and the distant pulse continued, Leo's eyes narrowed with determination. The station had been challenged, yes, but the real test was still coming. The glowing homework on the console shimmered one last time, symbols twisting in patterns he did not yet fully understand. Piran chirped, looking toward the corridor, eyes sharp. Leo swallowed hard. "We'll face it together," he said softly. And in the shadows beyond the classroom, the faint pulse grew stronger, hinting at a threat far greater than any they had seen. The battle was over, for now. But the universe had only just begun to test human courage, intelligence, and heart.